Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. We're taking a look at the AP Top 25 poll. Just got dropped today. The fellas have some takes before we get into it. Again, guys, just wanted to say thank you for all the support you guys have shown the channel. It's a blast talking ball with you guys. Leave your comments down in the comment section. We love chopping it up in the comment section. And if you guys do like the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate y'all. Dylan, I'm going to kick it off to you. Let's start with the top four. What are you thinking of the top four here?
This is pretty much exactly how I'd have it. Maybe with the one exception of popping Clemson over Georgia, but that would be really just quibbling just to do it. But I think Clemson might have the better defense just in terms of what they're bringing back and in the pedigree and all that. But it's really tight. I wouldn't argue it.
I like having Georgia at 3. I mean, the returning national champions. They still going to have a good defense, but I think the offense is really going to surprise people this year. I think this Georgia offense behind a phenomenal offensive line and 2 running backs in Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton, who are very good ball players. I think the Georgia offense is going to surprise some people. So I'm very, very comfortable having them in that top 4. And then Clemson, that's a team that everybody is sleeping on. The AP poll isn't, though. That's one of our teams that we absolutely love. Got that future to win an ACC championship game. Really high on Tigers. Here's my first quibble. Notre Dame at 5. Starting a quarterback that we haven't really seen, and when we did see him, Tyler Buchner wasn't that impressive, was just named quarterback 1. I like what they have on defense. I have some question marks about how explosive that passing game can be. I think 5 is just a little too high for a team that has more question marks than some other teams.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I don't know how are they going to be that much better than they were last year? I mean, and they frankly weren't great. They didn't have any really big wins. They lost the 2 big tough teams I'd say they played. So I'm kind of with you. I think they're too high. I frankly think you probably Michigan belongs over all 3 of the teams they're behind. I think they're better than Utah. I think they're better than A&M. Just there's not as much question with Michigan. Last year, they obviously were a playoff team, really kicked the teeth out of Ohio State, and that's obviously a huge win. And I just don't know what those other 3 programs did. I mean, you watched Utah play Ohio State. They really, they had a good first half, but when Ohio State was clicking, they didn't belong on that field.
Yeah, Michigan's a team that I think a lot of people, and we're obviously Michigan fans, but Michigan is the team that if J.J. McCarthy plays, the ceiling for this offense is really, the ceiling already is really high. They return pretty much all of their playmakers on the offense side of the ball. The offensive line is going to be even better than it was last year. I mean, the big question mark is Hutch, David Ajabo, Dax Hill. They lose 3 guys who were legit studs last year. If they can replace those guys, they're a top 5 team in the country, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And then A&M is just we talked about this before we jumped on. Texas A&M checks all the boxes besides one of the most important boxes that you can have for a football team, and that is an explosive passing game. I mean, they're outside the top 100 the last couple of years in explosive passing game, and this is not going to cut it. And that's
the problem with that is it's a 2-headed problem. I don't think they're wildly talented on the edge at wideout. In obvious, the glaring issue is the quarterback play has been abysmal. So I think, and that's the problem is who's going to be that alpha dog wideout. I think Aeneas Smith is a very good player, but I kind of see him as a number 2 guy. I just don't see him as that Jamar Chase or that real.
Oh yeah, Jackson. He's a gadget. He's more of a gadget guy than he is a legit wide receiver. I want to see him get more touches. Texas A&M is going to need to rely, and I think it's more on the quarterback play than it is the wide receivers. They've recruited some good wide receivers. I just don't think the quarterbacks, especially last year in Zach Calzada.
You can recruit good wide receivers, but you also need to put it on the field. And in my opinion, you haven't seen good enough play from a Chase Lane, from some of those guys who I think you expected to be really good.
I mean, Damon Demas was a high 5-star, now not even on the team. They do have a bunch of young 5-star receivers. Evan Stewart kind of headlining that group. If those guys can arrive a little earlier than expected and be playmakers this year, again, this team is loaded.
They belong there. If that passing game is meaningfully better, they're a top 5 team, probably.
100%. Utah, 7's about right for Utah. I mean, they're a super solid team. I don't think they're a top 5 team, but they're probably not outside the top 10. Then you have Dill. Oklahoma. That's our team for this year, coming in at 9, back to back with Baylor.
I feel like
Probably
it's a little disrespectful to Baylor, frankly. Like Baylor was by far the better team last year. And I love Oklahoma, obviously. Like, I think everybody in the world's a Venables fan, and everybody in the world wants to see Oklahoma do well just to stick it to Lincoln. But I mean, I'm a Baylor guy too. I do feel like I think there's a case to be made that Baylor belongs a notch higher than Oklahoma just because last year they were the better team. And I mean, I think that defense is still going to be absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that's one of those where it's like, is that defense, was that good because Dave Aranda is just phenomenal at coaching defense? Okay, maybe. But they also lose some guys that I like, Jalen Petrie, Terrell Bernard, like those guys were really, really important.
Secondary is like we're gonna see because they did lose some stuff.
That defensive line, though, like the front seven is going to be really, really good for Baylor. I'm excited to see Oklahoma Baylor. That is going to be. I don't even know who I'm going to root for. Like, I love both teams. Like, they're both like one. They're both our guy teams. Like Brent Venables. It ain't good enough. That's like an all timer for me. I am.
He's got a perfect voice for those speeches. But
yeah, I'm full on the Brent. Know what team? So Oregon question mark at quarterback. I like a lot of what they have to bring. I think they'll finish probably inside the top 15 just because I don't think the Pac-12 is all that strong. Am I taking Oregon to beat some of these teams outside of the top 10? I don't know.
I think that's a fair spot to put him at number 11. I think you could argue like an NC State maybe, but that seems about fair for Oregon probably.
I'll tell you what, like a team like Arkansas, I think I would take Arkansas over Oregon on a neutral field. I'll tell you what team that I'm not very high on this year. That's the Oklahoma State Cowboys. I get their defense was so good last year, and we just talked about the situation with Baylor. Was it the Jimmies and Joes, or was it the defensive coaching? I think Oklahoma State really relied on Jim Knowles and what he brought to the table from a schematic point of the defense. He's gone. Spencer Sanders isn't a guy that I'm like gonna follow into war. Like I think he flashes, but he's never really played consistently good. I don't know who's gonna step up at wide receiver. They lose Jalen Warren. That's another team that I think has more questions than answers, and I'm not very
like. I don't know. Did they ever look like awesome last year? I mean,
yes.
Like Oklahoma probably should have beaten them. That was just like mistakes up and down. I think Baylor was quite a bit better than them. Like, yeah, they snuck back in some of those games, but I never watched. I was like, oh, I think Baylor's a better team. I kind of thought, and they were obviously in the Big 12 title game playing with their backup. So I don't know. I don't get the sense Oklahoma State's gonna like. They're not different than what they've been the last 10 years under Mike Gundy, and they've never been a top 15 team. So
I've never watched, going back to your point, I didn't watch an Oklahoma State game last year and ever think this is a bona fide top 10, top 5 team.
Exactly.
Like, they never really looked apart. And you could also say the same thing and we'll just skip around here to Michigan State. Michigan State's a team that they won 5-0, 6-0 in one score games. Like, they power ranked weren't in the top 25. They just knew how to win, and I'll give Mel Tucker credit. That is a great characteristic to have. Like, pretty much the opposite of Nebraska. When the game is tight, you figure out how to win games. I think Michigan State was extremely reliant on Kenneth Walker. You go back and watch that offense. Kenneth Walker was like a one-man show. I do like Jaden Reed a lot. I think he's one of the best receivers in the Big Ten. I think losing Kenneth Walker, I don't think guys like Jalen Berger will be able to replace that production. And Michigan State's a team I'm probably fading this year.
Yeah, they're a team that yeah, exactly. The opposite of Nebraska, but could have had a similar season when it all comes down to it. So I'm also not a Michigan State fan. Obviously, I don't really care for the program anyway, but I think that was a season that they need to be a much better team to come close to repeating that.
Let's talk about NC State a little bit. That's a team that's getting a lot of hype. We liked them last year a lot coming into the year. They got banged up, but they still, I thought that team was going to be really good on defense. I thought they were going to run the ball extremely well. They were pretty good on defense, but what made them so good was Devin Leary all of a sudden was like the best quarterback in the ACC last year. That's where NC State made their money. If they can stay healthy with those linebackers on defense and have Devin Leary be the stud that he was last year, they can be a top 15 team. I think that's fair. 13. What are you thinking about NC State there?
Yeah, this is like a team I think you could quibble with them and say they're maybe better than Oregon and Oklahoma State. I'm a big NC State fan.
Yeah.
Oregon, maybe not. I think they're better. I think they'd beat Oklahoma State on a neutral site. But this is the team USC at 14, and I get what they're doing, but that doesn't are they really better than Wisconsin, Arkansas, Ole Miss? I'm not really sold yet.
My take is if you're gonna have USC this high, where's Texas? I think they're the same team. Like they were both like bad teams last year that have a ton of transfers coming in that are very talented, and you're just not really sure how it's gonna shake out. I like the talent, like USC on paper is scary good on offense. It's hard to ignore. Defense, they have some guys, but it's a lot of transfers. It's a lot of question marks. I'm not mad about USC being a 14th ranked team. But then where's Texas? That's kind of my take.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't know. Similar vibes.
I just like a team like Arkansas, a really good season last year.
Arkansas being slept on.
Maybe not fair to have USC like way above them.
I'm with you.
I mean, again, it's like that's a team that could potentially be really, really good. It's not like crazy to talk about them there.
So Miami, that's I think fair. I mean, one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Tyler Van Dyke, a new coach. I think this might be a little early for Miami's arrival. I think they're going to be good in the next couple of years under Mario Cristobal and what he's doing on the recruiting trail. 16, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. This is also a team I just don't like, probably because of some bad feelings about Josh Gaddis going there from Michigan. But I think probably fair. Like this team, like they were really good. They're probably the second best team in the ACC by the end of the year once they let Van Dyke go. Maybe not. They were right.
Like him. I don't like him over NC State.
Right up there with NC State. So it's probably fair. I
didn't know what to do with that either. You're stumbling. I'm stumbling. Pitt, I think that's too high. I think losing a guy like Kenny Pickett really hurts. Keaton Slovis is no Kenny Pickett, in my opinion. I like a lot of what Pitt has on the defense side of the ball. One of the best defense lines in the country. They're going to play good defense. But I think they lose too much on offense. And when you start getting into those, we're going to slow it down. We're going to run less plays. We're going to run the ball and kind of play defense. You get into those one-score coin flip games, I think Pitt's going to be in too many of those to kind of gut out. They're not like losing Kenny Pickett, losing Jordan Addison, losing Mark Whipple. I am not very confident in that Pitt offense.
Yeah, I don't think you can be. The one thing is their defense will be really, really good.
Yes.
So I think they're a top 25 team. It may be a little high, but I don't think it's like crazy. I think they're like in the 20-ish range. So it's not. I'm not mad about it for sure. These two teams should be higher in my opinion.
Me too. I think Wisco, they're both teams, especially Wisco is like not a flashy team by any means, but now that they when you saw them run with Braylon Allen and give him the ROC 20, 25 touches a game, they were a different team. I mean, that's what Wisconsin does. They find their RB1, they get really, really physical, and they run the ball down your throat. If Graham Mertz can take a step in the right direction, he got better towards the end of the year. If he can continue to take some steps, I think they can be a top 15 team. But again, they need more from Graham Mertz. He was just so brutal to start the year last year. If he can continue with how he finished the year, I mean, this Wisconsin team, it's not flashy. They're going to play good defense, and they're going to run the football. They'll be a top 15 team, though.
I think when it's all said and done, they will be. I think the one concern is they lost everything on defense pretty much, which is they're for sure a system team. They roll it every year, and you see new faces, and they all play really well. And Jim Leonard obviously is a great, great defensive coordinator. But I think these two, Arkansas, Wisconsin, they should probably be higher than like the Miamis and Pitt.
Arkansas is more of a team that I'm pounding. I am pounding the table for them to be higher. Yeah, top 15 at least. I mean, Arkansas is a team that competed with a lot of teams in the SEC last year. A guy like KJ Jefferson does not get enough credit. I think too many people are like, oh, he's just a running quarterback. Yeah, he's a very good running quarterback. He's a linebacker running the football. Very physical. They'll have a good offensive line. But he's also like Arkansas, when we previewed them and you look at the stats, they were one of the most efficient teams through the air. Like when they throw it at a high level. KJ Jefferson only threw 4 interceptions last year. He takes care of the football. Kendall Briles is one of the best OCs in the country, in my opinion. They'll have a good defense. The big question mark is Treylon Burks. But I think I think they'll be all right. And I think this will be a top 15.
Arkansas kind of had a rough go last year because they were the first team to really run into the Georgia buzzsaw. And then everyone was like, oh, the same old Arkansas bad team. But then everybody was a bad team because everybody was getting chewed up by Georgia last year. Like when Georgia got on you and they got to smush your face in the ground, they never let you up. So it's.
I mean, what happened that game is Arkansas gave a touchdown and then they get backed up. I think a punt got blocked for a touchdown. It got out of control and snowballed on them so fast. I think
they caught them early before people realized how good Georgia was, and I think that knocked them down in the rankings. And they never quite got back up to probably where they belonged because they were a really good team last year.
So here's two teams that I kind of have some takes on. Kentucky. I'm not quite as high. I'm not into the Will Levis hype. I think Will Levis can be awesome, but I think he's still a projection. I think people putting him as the number one quarterback in the draft is absurd. You didn't really see him do much special. He is a great athlete. He's a big body. He has a rocket arm. You saw all that. Very, very reliant on Wendell Robinson and a good offensive line. I don't know. Will Levis isn't a guy that I'm necessarily putting all my eggs in a basket for.
Yeah, Kentucky's, again, a team you feel like could probably be really good if Will Levis kind of plays to what you think he maybe could be. But that's kind of he hasn't played great college football at any point yet. They've been a very mediocre offense when he's the quarterback. So
I mean, there's still same old Kentucky last year. They run the ball down your throat and they play good defense. I think they'll still run the ball extremely well. They always have a good offensive line. Will Levis can run the ball himself. Kentucky's always missed that. It kind of in a similar vein to Texas A&M, just not quite as talented. They just don't have that explosive passing game. Even back to the days where Lynn Bowden was a Wildcat. That was a very, very good team. If they had a quarterback that could push the ball down the field, Terry Wilson just wasn't it. I think they could be a good team. So if Will Levis can be that dude and can play a top 10 pick this year, they can be a special team. But I'm not necessarily putting them there yet because Will Levis hasn't shown me enough, quite frankly.
That's fair take. I wouldn't disagree with that.
Ole Miss, ton of question marks, ton of transfers. Not really sure what the quarterback situation is. That's another team that they could be really good, but they also might not be a top 25 team. Kind of hard to get a gauge on.
Yeah, I think this is probably where they belong. They could finish easily. They could for sure end up outside top 25 because, again, they play a hard schedule, so they're going to have trouble having a lot of really good wins out of that conference. And again, you're kind of right. They're just the way they recruit high school is not particularly strong. And then, so you are so reliant on transfers and I don't think anyone knows exactly if that's going to work yet.
But it also, Zach Evans behind a very good offensive line. This team could be a top 15, top 10 team.
Oh, that's why I'm not saying they belong at the back of this list per se, but they probably.
That's just a tough team. You got Wake Forest, who I like it. They got pushed down a little bit because Sam Hartman, questionable when he's going to be playing football again. They do start a really easy schedule. Their first 4 games are kind of a cakewalk. So Sam Hartman can get ready for week 5, week 6. This Wake Forest team can be really good. It's the most talented team we've seen. COVID hasn't helped a ton of teams. It's really helped Wake Forest give those guys what they do is they recruit and they develop. They don't recruit at a high level, but they redshirt those guys. They get them ready. And so when they're 5th-year seniors, they're ready to rock and roll. Now they're getting guys who are 6th and 7th-year seniors because of the COVID eligibility. It's really helped Wake. They're a good team. I think that's fair. And then you got Cincinnati, who I'm not very high on.
Yeah, you could argue they don't belong in this list.
It's hard not to because they were a bona fide top 10
team.
They
can't lose 10 pros. That's not how Cincinnati's set up to do it. And I don't think any team in the non-Power 5 conferences are set up to do it that way. So, yeah, they were obviously had such an incredible year last year. I don't think Cincinnati fans would trade it, but I do think it's going to be hard to repeat that.
One of the lists, he's been riding Cincinnati and he's been right. He was right all of last year. Always Cincinnati rider was right the whole year. I was wrong the whole year. I think I'm right this year. I don't think Cincinnati is going to be that good. He likes him against Arkansas week 1. I cannot wait to watch that game and get in the comment section with him. Houston, that's my team. I think Houston's better than Cincinnati this year.
Yeah, Houston's good. I mean, you got like some really good players on offense, and that's a team that like sneaky is recruited pretty well, have a lot of pros, but I wouldn't say are getting decimated by like the draft from last year.
And they've hit the transfer portal really well. That's another team that they're kind of following in SMU's shoes where, okay, you're not going to be able to get the big dogs out of high school over Oklahoma, Texas, Texas A&M. But those guys that I don't want to use the word misfits, but the guys who don't necessarily crack the starting lineup after the first couple of years after stints at Oklahoma, Texas A&M, they pick those guys up. And so they have a talented team. Clayton Tune, I think, is very underrated. You have Tank Dell, who's an absolute stud. And the defensive line is really good for Houston. Like, I'm quite high on this team. And then the last team I'm very high on, BYU. Jaron Hall's an absolute stud. That's another team that not necessarily is the most flashy team, but they're a damn good football team.
Yeah, I think BYU, you could argue, will be up a little higher by the end of the year. I think, and they're going to have a chance. Like their schedule is a very much Power 5 schedule if you look at it, which is like good. I think BYU should be playing bigger games. I think they're doing it this year, which I'm excited about, and I think they're going to beat a couple of them. So I think they could finish up above an Ole Miss, above a Wake Forest.
I'll give you a red Sharpie pick right now. Vegas, BYU, Notre Dame. Give me BYU there. I really like that game. I think BYU is a really good team that Vegas and just the media in general aren't very high on. I think BYU is going to be inside the top 20 when we come December. Now, Dill, I'm gonna kick it to you. What teams got gypped? What teams got left off here?
Tennessee, mark my words, is going to be a top 15 team by the
They're
end.
the next highest here.
I know, and they obviously should be on this list, but like you're telling me Tennessee wouldn't stomp a Michigan State on a neutral site? Like, no way. Nobody's going to stop Tennessee on offense. And you got to think they'll be a little bit like their defense was bad, and I don't think it's going to be great this year. But I do think there's some talent, and I think if they can get it going a little bit, with that offense with a whole year of Hendon Hooker, I think is going to like knock some people's socks off.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple teams that I think not necessarily deserve to be in the top 25 now, but I think can be in the top 25 by the time we're in December. I think Florida is a very talented team that if they just play to their standard, I think they can be it. And LSU in the same way. LSU is disgustingly talented. You take a look at the guys they've recruited the last couple of years, from top 5 classes like the last 3 years, recruit really well. They have a coach that is a much more consistent coach. Ed Orgeron, like he caught fire for that 2019 season. Brian Kelly doesn't lose games he's not supposed to lose. That's what LSU's been doing too much. I think LSU's a team, and then a sneaky flyer, UCF. I love their schedule. I like their games. The big games they have are at home. That's a hard place to play in the bounce house. I'm a UCF guy.
Yeah, I mean that is good to get them at home because you're right. That's an environment that I think people kind of like sleep on a little bit, and then you hear it is bouncing for sure. But my last team, I think, and you can't put them there now because they were 3-9, but I'm pretty sure Nebraska is going to worm their way into that end of the bottom of the top 25 list. Like if you watch that Nebraska team, they hung with Ohio State. They probably could have beaten, or certainly could have beaten Michigan. Arguably should have beaten Michigan
and Iowa.
Should have beaten Michigan State
and Michigan State.
So it's like they should have basically beaten everybody and like some really good teams, obviously based on what the AP thinks. So I'm kind of. The problem is Nebraska's been Nebrasking for a while. Like you thought they should have beaten these teams every year, and then somehow they're finding ways to lose. But they did replace the special teams coordinator, I think, and maybe they will get it cranked up a little bit. Because
Nebraska was a top like 30 power ranked team, and they were 3-9. And it's like hard to believe if you didn't play special teams. If you just started every drive at the 20. They probably would have been like a 7-5 team. Like they legit lost like 2 or 3 games based on special teams alone. That's how bad it was. Nebraska's a damn good football team, and they got better in the offseason with the transfer portal. I'm also on the Nebraska train. Would I put money on Nebraska to be a top 25 team? No, I would not put money on Nebraska. But I do think this is a very good team, and you obviously have to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, right. I don't think I have any more. I want to say Kansas State, but that's just kind of that feels like I'm reaching.
I want to say so many more teams like South Carolina, obviously Texas. There's so many teams that could like it. It's a really it's a lot of teams are up in the air. We'll close it on that, guys. Appreciate you checking us out again. You like the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and then let us know in the comment section which teams are getting disrespected. I'm sure we're going to see some Cincinnati. I'm sure we're going to see some Penn State. We appreciate you guys checking us out, and we're going to talk to y'all later.